last week I watched the movie Awakenings with actor Robin Williams. He portrayed Dr. I always forget the name, but Dr. Malcolm Sayer. And the movie was based on a true story in an event that took place in 1969. Dr. Malcolm Sayer in the film was hired by this hospital in the Bronx, and he was a kind of a research medical doctor, not so much of a medical doctor that we think of that takes care of patients, but more of a researcher behind the scenes. Anyways, he gets hired by this hospital in the Bronx to be an on-floor medical doctor, and it really wasn't so much because Dr. Malcolm Sayer exemplified great personal skills, but rather the hospital was rather desperate to have somebody fill that position. And so even though he wasn't the best candidate, far from it, he was hired on to be this on-floor medical doctor physician. And he notices a trend among all these patients on his floor that they are all in this semi-catatonic state, and he notices upon examining them that they could react to certain stimuli, and so their reflexes in some cases were still intact, even though they couldn't really communicate or move on their own, but certain stimuli forced them to react to certain situations. And so in the movie, there's this scene where Robin Williams, Dr. Sayer, tosses a tennis ball, and one of the patients just kind of grabs it. And one of the characters in the movie is Leonard, and Leonard is in this semi-catatonic state, pretty much comatose, and he's 41 years old. And in the film, you get to know that this man named Leonard, he was actually 11 years old when he went into this semi-catatonic comatose state. And so for 30 years of his life, he's been in this state where he can't talk, he can't move, he does not have the various liberties in life that we take for granted, like walking, like talking, like drawing, painting, all these things Leonard was deprived of, and so were these other patients. And Dr. Sayer in the film, because he's a researcher, he wanted to get to the root cause of why all of these patients, including Leonard, can't live this life that we know to be good. And Dr. Sayer ends up talking to his boss, Dr. Kaufman, at the hospital to give an experimental drug to Leonard to see if he could awaken Leonard from his semi-catatonic state. And the drug was, in the movie, showcased to be this, experimental drug that was known to perhaps stop or treat Parkinson's disease. And this condition that Leonard and all these other patients had was very similar to Parkinson's. But Dr. Sayer found out that it was actually encephalitis, and there was an outbreak of it in the 1920s to 1930s. He gets permission from Dr. Kaufman to give, on a one-time basis, this experimental drug to Leonard, but he had to get permission first from Leonard's mother, because she was the primary caretaker of him. And so she gives him permission, and lo and behold, after the night after he's given this experimental drug, for the first time ever since he was 11 years old, Leonard wakes up from his comatose state. And when I was watching the film, I couldn't just help but think, like, what would it be like to be Leonard or some of the other patients who ended up getting this medication to wake up for the first time after 30 years of being in a comatose state where you could, experience the world in a new way, but also in an unknown way that they knew previously. Because, again, Leonard was 11 years old when he went into this comatose state. He found himself to be 41 years old when he came out of it for the first time. And, just thinking about, you suddenly wake up and you can speak again, you can walk again, and you probably don't know how many years it has been since you went into that state. And so you go to the first thing you do is you go to the bathroom by yourself for the first time, and you see yourself in the mirror and see that you're a 41-year-old, and previously you had only known that you're an 11-year-old. And so 30 years of your life have just gone like that in an instant. And it really just makes you think about your own life and about what you take for granted. And so Dr. Sayer himself, he's kind of put in this position of being a friend to Leonard, of being sort of a father figure at the same time to Leonard, because Leonard had no bearings of how to navigate this new world that he's awoken to, and he has to navigate the emotions, the grieving that he had to grieve 30 years of his life that he wasn't able to live. And Dr. Sayer is kind of there to guide Leonard, but there's a reciprocal relationship that was made between Dr. Sayer and Leonard. So in some ways, Dr. Sayer was more free than Leonard because he wasn't in a semi-catatonic state for his entire life like Leonard. But Dr. Sayer was unable to really engage with the people around him because he was socially insecure in himself, and he couldn't bring himself to actually do the things that he would want to do. He was skittish of engaging with people. He found it much more comfortable to stick to his research, stick to his books, and would rather not engage with people because people are uncontrollable and you don't know how they're going to react to certain situations. And so when Leonard started to navigate this new world that he's been awoken to, he kind of pushes the buttons of Dr. Sayer, because Leonard had this freedom of exploring the world and reality in this lightheartedness that Dr. Sayer couldn't understand. And so lo and behold, at the end of the film, all these people that miraculously came to life, that were awakened from their comatose state, actually ended up going back into it. The drug wore off, and the effectiveness after a certain amount of time faded away. So a lot of these people, including Leonard, went back into their comatose state. But there was a lesson to be learned for Dr. Sayer. Because of the influence of Leonard had on his life, he was actually able to see the great gift of his life, and he overcame the fears that he had that prevented him from engaging with the people around him. And so you just see this beautiful character development in Dr. Sayer because of this relationship and friendship that he developed with Leonard. And so, anyways, just that beautiful dynamic of, yes, Leonard was unfree in a certain sense because he was comatose, but at another level, he was more free than Dr. Sayer because he wasn't afraid to engage with reality. He wasn't afraid to do new things. He wasn't afraid to marvel at the joys of life, even at the difficulties of acknowledging that he had 30 years that he wasn't able to be coherently aware of his existence. And Dr. Sayer, on the other hand, has lived his life. He's probably around the same age as Leonard, but has not truly lived. He's remained, he was always kind of lived his life in an inward way because he couldn't relate to others. And so I just found it to be a beautiful movie, and my rating that I would give it is probably a 4 stars out of 5 stars. And the only reason why I would hesitate from giving it 5 stars is because in the movie there's this scene of Dr. Sayer trying to investigate what this condition was that was affecting all of his patients. And anyways, so we ended up trying to communicate to Leonard by using a Ouija board, and that is, within the Catholic tradition, like Ouija boards are a no-no. They really awaken a door to the demonic, and and I don't know if it was based on like that aspect of the movie actually happened, but it just made me uncomfortable to watch. And anyways, just I had a visceral reaction to that, and I was just like, that is malpractice of a doctor uh, to to do a Ouija board with a comatose person, even if the person's not comatose. Like, Ouija boards are a no for the Catholic faith, and it does not promote the integrity of the human person. But all in all, I think there are some lessons to be learned in that film. And towards the end of the film, there's this beautiful line that the human spirit is more powerful than what science may seem to indicate. So all throughout this time of all these patients being comatose, like, they had an internal awareness that they were trapped, that they were not living life, or they couldn't live life to their fullest capacity. And so it was a suffering for them, even though they couldn't speak or they couldn't seemingly think, but they could. And the human spirit is more powerful than the afflictions that happen to the body. And that was a really great lesson. And then, reflecting on the character again of Dr. Sayer, we're not always as free as we think. And we can think that because we're not in a semi-catatonic state that we're living life to the full. But if we were honest to ourselves, we're not as free as we ought to be, or we're not as free as we can be.